Good morning everyone, welcome to Jam Virtual Church. It's really good to be with you today, and we've just got a couple more of these before we start our ultimate summer greatest hits, where we'll be replaying some of the best Jam Virtual Churches as voted by you. So if you have a favourite, stick us an email together, get your parents to help you if you need that, and let us know which was your favourite Jam Virtual Church, and then we can include that in our series. If you're not sure which ones they were, they're all still on the church website, so you can have a quick look to remind yourself and do that. But we really hope you have a great morning here today at Jam Virtual Church and enjoy the worship and the story, the prayer, the craft, all the things that are there for you guys. And we really hope soon to be able to be back together. And speaking of being back together, later on today, we have Together at 4. So if you'd like to come along to that, please do join us for that. Anyway, enough from me, and it's time for Jam Virtual Church.
Today's story is from the last bit of the shipwreck, and it's from Acts 36 through to chapter 28 and verse 6, and it's all about Paul and them being shipwrecked on Malta. Have fun. So they cut off the anchors and let them sink in the sea, and the same with the untied ropes that held the steering oars. They raised the sail in the front of the ship so that the wind would blow the ship forwards and head for shore. But the ship hit the sandbanks and run aground, and there were lots of angry voices on the ship. The soldiers made a plan to kill the prisoners in order to keep them from swimming ashore and escaping, but the army officer wanted to save Paul, so he stopped them from doing this. Instead, he ordered the men to swim, that who could swim, and jump overboard and swim ashore, with the rest holding on to planks of wood, broken pieces of ship, and this is how they all got to shore safely. When they arrived and were safely on shore, the villagers and the natives of Malta started a fire because it had started to rain, and to make them nice and warm and safe after getting wet in the sea. They'd gathered up sticks to make a very large fire. Paul wanted to help because that's the type of guy he was, so he went off to find some sticks and found some to put on the fire. But he hadn't realised in the fire he had collected something else. Suddenly, out of the fire jumped a snake, a poisonous one, and it sent Paul all to the floor. The men and people around saying, oh, he must be a really bad man because he must be a murderer because the snake's got him and it's his punishment. But Paul knew this was God's plan, and he threw the snake into the fire and to show everybody how God was and his love. And then he sat down by the fire and enjoyed the evening. And the people thought he was a god, and they kept saying it to him.
And Hello, John here. This morning we've heard a story of Paul's shipwreck on the island of Malta. For today's activity, I want to look at three aspects of the story, just to see if it helps us to understand the story better. Firstly, let's look at this boat. The boat that Paul and the other prisoners and the Roman soldiers and the crew and all the other passengers were travelling on was likely to have been a typical Roman cargo boat of the time. These large boats were used to carry vast quantities of grain from North Africa to Rome. They were also used to call in around the Mediterranean from port to port, picking up passengers and cargo at each port. The boats were pulled along by two large sails, one at the front, the bow, and the mainsail set towards the back, the stern. This boat is really quite big. Let's see if we can work out how big it is. Look at the carved swan's head at the stern of the boat. There's a platform beneath it. Around that platform is a railing. Okay, now imagine that a person is standing on that platform looking out at the back of the boat and leaning on that rail. The bar on top of that rail would likely come up to the waist of the person standing there. Now that gives us a scale, an idea of how big the boat is. Sometimes these boats carried more than 300 people at a time. Although these boats could travel at a fair speed with a following wind, that's a wind behind them, they were not efficient when winds were changeable or in the wrong direction. So they weren't used at winter, and they certainly weren't used when storms were expected. Can you see the two massive oars that the crew used to steer the boat? And the two anchors at the bow that were lowered to the seabed to stop the boat and hold it still. Now let's look at the storm. It was autumn, so early winter storms were to be expected. The captain of Paul's ship was taking a risk sailing at that time of year. When the storm broke, the captain had no option but to let the boat be blown along in the direction of the wind. I expect he would have reduced the area of sail to try to slow down the boat, and he would have thrown overboard cargo to lighten the vessel so it sailed higher in the water. He would then have fought desperately to keep some control of the boat, using the steering oars and adjusting the sails. As time went on, he and his crew would have become very tired indeed. All the time, of course, the captain and the passengers and the crew would have been praying for the storm to end. This storm, we understand, went on for nearly 2 weeks.
So, we now come to the actual shipwreck. It was night, the wind was blowing hard, and the sailors sensed that they were nearing land. They checked the depth of the water around them, and yes, it was getting shallower. Now, they were scared of being blown onto a rocky coast. So they dropped their anchors into the shallow water and waited until morning. When dawn came, they saw that there was a sandy beach right in front of them. So they cut their anchor lines, and the boat was blown gradually towards the beach. Then, with a dreadful grinding noise, the boat stopped dead. It had grounded on a sandbar, some way off from the shore. The waves continued to pound the back of the boat, and the boat began to break up. Paul and the rest of the passengers had no option but to attempt to swim to shore. They jumped in and clung to bits of boat, whilst others trusted to their own swimming skills. We're told that they all got to the shore safely. Okay, why don't you now draw a little snapshot, one part of this incident, this shipwreck incident or the storm, something that you can draw and keep to remind you of the story. Okay? See you soon. Bye.
I'm gonna jump up and down, I'm gonna spin round and round, I'm gonna praise your name forever. Gonna shout out loud, gonna deafen the crowd, I'm gonna send my praise to heaven. Gonna jump up and down, I'm gonna spin round and round, I'm gonna praise your name forever. Gonna shout out loud, gonna deafen the crowd, I'm gonna send my praise to heaven. I will run this race and I will never stop. I'll follow Jesus till the day I drop. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When you've got such a lot, when you've got not a lot, what? Be happy. I'm gonna jump up and down, I'm gonna spin round and round, I'm gonna praise your name forever. Gonna shout out loud, gonna deafen the crowd, I'm gonna send my praise to heaven. Gonna jump up and down, I'm gonna spin round and round, I'm gonna praise your name forever. Gonna shout out loud, gonna deafen the crowd, I'm gonna send my praise to heaven. I will run this race and I will never stop. I'll follow Jesus till the day I drop. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When you've got such a lot, when you've got not a lot, what? Be happy. I'm gonna jump up and down, I'm gonna spin round and round, I'm gonna praise your name forever. Gonna shout out loud, gonna deafen the crowd, I'm gonna send my praise to heaven. Gonna jump up and down, I'm gonna spin round and round, I'm gonna praise your name forever. Gonna shout out loud, gonna deafen the crowd, I'm gonna send my praise to heaven. Gonna send my praise to heaven. Gonna send my praise to heaven.
Paul's adventures and travels led him to Jerusalem. There the Jewish leaders brought up false charges against him, and Paul was taken prisoner and sent to Caesarea to stand trial before King Agrippa. Although King Agrippa found that Paul had committed no crime, because he was a Roman citizen and had appealed to the Roman emperor, Paul was sent to Rome. Under the watchful eyes of Julius, a Roman officer, Paul and a number of other prisoners boarded a large sailing ship that would carry them to many port cities on the long journey to Rome. Once aboard the ship, Paul was led on a winding journey that took him from Caesarea to Sidon, to Myra, to Cnidus, and then around the island of Crete, where they docked at a place called Fair Havens. Getting to Fair Havens had been a long and difficult journey. Winter was approaching, bringing with it dangerous weather and sailing conditions. Paul pleaded with the sailors and officers to stay on Crete. Paul warned them, "Continuing this journey will bring disaster to our ship, cargo, and our own lives. We should remain here." Despite Paul's warnings, the officer in charge was persuaded by the ship's captain to find a safer place on the island of Crete where they could spend the winter. Soon after they set sail, what was a gentle breeze turned into hurricane-force winds that blew their ship far off course and out into the open sea. The sailors tried to control the ship, but nothing they did could put them back on course. Exhausted, the sailors secured the ship as best as they could with ropes, and then let the storm drive them wherever it pleased. For many days, the ship sailed on raging seas under the black skies of the storm that blotted out the sun and the stars. Exhausted and starving, everyone on board began to lose hope that they would survive this voyage. All except for Paul. Paul stood in front of the crew and passengers and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not left Crete. But take courage. God's angel came to me last night and said that the ship will be destroyed, but all of us will survive. Even though we will be shipwrecked, God will save us." Finally, after 14 nights of fear and misery, the sailors sensed that the ship was approaching land. By measuring the water's depth, the sailors were able to tell that they were getting closer. They dropped the ship's anchors, hoping that they would stop before crashing against the rocks. Some of the terrified sailors couldn't wait to get off the ship and onto dry land, so they lowered the lifeboat to the water while pretending to lower anchors. Paul told a Roman officer what was happening and warned, "Unless we all stay on this boat, you won't survive." Hearing this, the officer cut the lifeboat loose, and it fell away. Before the sun came up the next day, Paul urged everyone to eat, so they would have strength to survive the events that would take place that day. Everyone on board knew that their voyage would end with a shipwreck. Paul could see the fear and concern on their faces, so he offered them encouragement by reminding them that God said everyone on the ship would make it safely to shore. Paul then took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of the crew and passengers. He broke it into pieces and then began to eat. Everyone on board ate until they were full, and they were strengthened and encouraged. At daylight, the sailors decided to run the ship aground. They cut away the anchors and aimed the ship for the beach. The ship slammed into a sandbar that was still a bit off the island shore. The ship wouldn't budge out of the sand, and the waves began to smash what was left of the ship into pieces. The Roman soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners to stop them from swimming away and escaping. But one soldier, who wanted to spare Paul's life, stopped the others from carrying out their plan. Some prisoners jumped overboard and swam ashore, while others survived by clinging to broken pieces of ship. In the end, everyone made it safely ashore on the island of Malta.
Come, Savior,
Hi everybody. Shall we close our eyes and take some time to pray to God?
Dear Lord, we thank you for this term. We thank you that we've all still been able to go to school, some of us, and play with our friends. And thank you that some of the things that we weren't able to do, we've been able to do. We thank you that we are now drawing near the summer holidays and we can spend more time with our families, maybe get away and go to another place in the country. We want to thank you that you have been there for us this term and you've kept us safe and you've looked after us. We want to thank you for all the hard work our teachers have put in this term and looked after us and helped us learn, especially as things have been really difficult at times. We also, Lord, want to look forward to what's coming in September and to rejoining and being back, hopefully face-to-face at church, which will be amazing. We want to thank you, Lord, that you are our friend and you look after us every day. Amen.
Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Give me oil in my lamp, I pray. Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Keep me burning till the break of day.
Keep me serving.